Hello, my name is Phillip and welcome to the presentation of an individual quality technique called cause and effect diagrams. The presentation itself is part of PRM 613 Project Integration and Quality Management class. Throughout our discussion about the individual quality technique, cause and effect, we will talk about the history of the cause and effect diagram as well as its origins, what a cause and effect diagram is, how it would be utilized, and different inputs and outputs you would use for the cause and effect diagram. We'll talk about advantages to using the cause and effect diagram as well as disadvantages of the tool. I will then talk about and apply the cause and effect diagram technique on the specific pet event that is part of our team project. And then I will finally close out with closings and references. What is the cause and effect technique and diagram, and why do we use the cause and effect technique? Firstly, the definition from the PEMBOK says that the cause and effect technique is a decomposition technique that helps identify possible effects of quality defects and errors, or helps trace an undesirable effect back to its root cause. The origin where the cause and effect technique was first used was by an individual named Kaora Ishikawa, and that was discovered while they were pioneering quality management practices at Kawasaki Motors. The cause and effect diagram takes many names, and I will probably be referring to the cause and effect diagram unilaterally as by a few different names. It goes by fishbone diagram, Ishikawa diagram for obvious reasons. It is also called YYs. All right, and to get back to why people use within quality management and oftentimes risk management, why they use cause and effect diagrams is because it can find the root causes to undesirable outcomes or effects of quality defects or errors. That's a really important thing to remember as we move on in our presentation. Getting to the cause and effect diagram itself, or also known as the fishbone diagram, you will see that generally when the cause and effect or fishbone diagram technique is utilized to help and support quality of a product or of anything else, there are 6 different steps that are generally used. Those 6 steps are: you first have to name the problem or effect of interest. It could be the outcome, it could be the specific thing that an undesirable event, outcome, or effect. You will see in the diagram to the left, above it says fishbone diagram. You will see that the undesirable outcome, if you can read that, says bad burgers. That would be the undesirable outcome that you have for that product. So it's very specific, and that is the effect, the undesirable effect. Okay, that is what you first have to do, is you have to be specific and come up with that problem or that effect. The second step is to organize causes of that effect into categories. Typically those categories are go under 6 different things, and they call them the 6 M's. Could be manpower or personnel, machines, materials, methods, measurements, and Mother Nature or environment. They are not always these 6 exact. If you were to be using a lot of technology, you might change machines to internet network, or methods to practices, or use other terminology to fit your specific project. But you would organize those causes into different categories. That would be the second step. The third step is you would brainstorm, typically with group members, team members. You'd brainstorm to identify possible causes and to create the diagram itself. I'll talk about this a little bit more, but as part of brainstorming, it is best used when there are a number of people in the group to help with brainstorming, right? And that will turn into, advantages of using this technique as there are more people in the group and more people on your team. The fourth step is you will review the diagram to make sure that you've worded things as you want them, and those categories are organized as you'd like. The fifth step is to discuss the final diagram, identify causes that are most critical for the follow-up investigation. Right? If you have a list of many causes, which causes are maybe the ones that are the most detrimental, or the ones that you could see happening most often, most probable to have happen. And then 6, to develop plans to confirm that the potential causes are actual causes. All right, develop a plan to ensure that these causes are very probable. As part of your fishbone diagram or your cause and effect diagram, as stated, it is important to understand or utilize different inputs and know that different outputs would also be expected while utilizing this technique in one of your projects for quality. Inputs could possibly be risk management plan, could be obviously a quality management plan, or maybe even project charter. Outputs, the outputs from utilizing this technique could possibly be changes to risk management plans, or obviously the quality management plans. All right, looking at the cause and effect diagrams, the fishbone diagrams, and looking at both when they are most efficient, when they're maybe not the most efficient, the advantages and disadvantages of the cause and effect diagram. The diagram is most efficient, best utilized when projects are relatively large scale, where there are many team members. Remember, I'm coming back to saying it is most efficient when there are many team members. It's really important to have a lot of feedback and a lot of brainstorming. It's also advantageous when there's a focused definition of the problem. If you're able to come up with very specific effects, then chances are it'll be a good technique to utilize for those effects, if it can be very specific. And it's also advantageous when maybe it's a large project in scope, and having visuals is an important thing as categories and organization, because naturally having the visuals there helps you compartmentalize the parts of the project in those categories, and maybe will help thinking about those. Disadvantages could be when the technique is maybe, I suppose I use the term overkill, right? Where you're putting a lot of work into something, but maybe it's already simplified enough, right? The cause and effects are relatively easy to identify. If it doesn't need an entire team to identify the effects and causes, then then it might be not a advantageous technique to use. If one person can sit down and do it to themselves and be pretty conclusive about it, then it may not take an entire team to brainstorm. It wouldn't be a good technique in that scenario. It's also not a great scenario. Kind of piggybacking off the last comments would be if there are fewer members of the project team, meaning there just aren't as many opinions, not as much brainstorming going on. And then the third reason why maybe you wouldn't use the fishbone technique would be, that no matter whether you use it or not, you can't ensure that the technique is going to find the root causes or the causes of the effects. Moving on to the example, how I'm applying the fishbone diagram, the cause and effect diagram, to my pet event, the pet event being tails and ales. My strategy as part of that group is to retain staff and making work across our employees and our volunteers fairly equal across the board, meaning that we're expecting volunteers to do a certain amount of work and to make sure that we're not overworking our employees to keep them healthy, keep them happy, and keep them so they're not overworked. As you can see, the effect that I've outlined was that tails and ales events work is completed unequally among employees and volunteers. So that is the effect, right? That is the undesired outcome. That is not what we want. All right, and as you can see, I did categorize six causes as organization. And you'll see environments, materials, methods, measurements, machines, and the personnel, the manpower. As you can see there, I'll give you an example for each one, but as you can see, those would be the causes, potential causes of that undesirable outcome. The one being work motivation, looking at environments, would be work motivation higher at select event activities, meaning that some activities at the event are there's more work going on because it's a more desired activity for a volunteer or employee. Materials, maybe there is a lack of training materials given, so volunteers could maybe not complete their task as expected. Methods, this is something that was brought up in the charter and something that has been brought up numerous times, I suppose. Just the errors in event planning, or more of the methods, the management of the event itself. Errors in estimations of tasks, poor task delegation, obviously being an important one to key on there. Measurements, the number of events, participants either being overestimated or underestimated. Machines, a cause to that effect could be, event technology not working as expected. And then personnel, because they are volunteers working, maybe they're a little bit more unreliable. And so what could happen is you have too few volunteers to begin giving those tasks in the first place, meaning that those staff would be working a little bit harder than expected. So that is an example of a cause and effect diagram where we have an effect, an undesired effect, right? Event work completed unequally, meaning some people having to do much more work than others, and others not needing to do as much. And then you see the causes categorized in 6 different areas and having different sub causes within those. So that is an example, and that is the example from our pet event of a cause and effect diagram. Thank you for listening in on my discussion, my presentation on an individual quality technique, that being cause and effect diagrams. Throughout the discussion, I talked about what a cause and effect diagram is, why we use a cause and effect diagram, how we use a cause and effect diagram or a fishbone diagram, advantages and disadvantages to utilizing the fishbone diagram, and finally, how I applied the fishbone diagram to help control quality at the specific pet event. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you are all a step closer to understanding how cause and effect diagrams can be used in quality control. So thank you very much.